We're now ready to see how we can use our triangles to evaluate trigonometric functions in quadrants other than the first quadrant. For our first example, we'll determine the values of the 6 trig functions at the angle 2 pi over 3. So our first job is to determine the base angle in the first quadrant that we can use to evaluate 2 pi over 3, and our base angle is pi over 3, since 2 pi over 3 is a multiple of pi over 3. So here I've drawn our triangle that we've seen before with this adjacent side of 1, an opposite of root 3, and a hypotenuse of 2. Now we need to shift this triangle into the appropriate quadrant. And we notice that 2 pi over 3 is greater than pi over 2 but less than pi, so it is in the second quadrant. Here I've drawn a picture of our base triangle in blue with the adjacent and opposite sides labeled, and our shifted triangle into the second quadrant in orange, which is what we'll use to evaluate our trig functions. And then you see this green arc line here that represents the angle 2 pi over 3. So here are our 6 trig functions, and we're going to use our common trig ratios. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so reading off of our orange triangle, we get root 3 over 2. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Notice for the orange triangle, because we're in the second quadrant, the adjacent side becomes negative because we're on the negative x-axis. So we'll have minus 1 over 2. The tangent is opposite over adjacent. So we have minus root 3 over 1, which we could write as just minus root 3. For the cosecant, since we already have the sine, we can simply write its reciprocal, or recall that the cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite, so 2 over root 3. Similarly, the secant is either the reciprocal of the cosine or hypotenuse over adjacent, so 2 over minus 1, or a minus 2 value. And cotangent will be minus 1 over root 3. For a second example, let's determine the value of the 6 trig functions at the angle theta equals minus 3 pi over 4. So here, again, we're not in the first quadrant, but we can see that our base angle is pi over 4, since this is a multiple of pi over 4. So here I've drawn our base triangle. Now, determining our quadrants, we have to recall that with a minus angle, we're going to shift around our circle clockwise. With a positive angle, you're moving counterclockwise. With a negative angle, you're moving clockwise. And we're moving 3/4 of the way around the top or bottom half of our circle, in this case the bottom half, so we will be in the third quadrant. So here I've drawn our base triangle again in blue. I've shifted that triangle over into the third quadrant, changing the sides to a minus 1 since I'm on the minus x-axis, and a minus 1 for the opposite since I am parallel to the minus y-axis. I have labeled the angle that we're interested in here in green. So the 6 trig functions can be found using the values on this orange triangle. So sine of minus 3 pi over 4 is minus 1 over root 2. Cosine of minus 3 pi over 4 is also minus 1 over root 2. The tangent takes the ratio of these sides, and since they're both negative 1s, we can write that as a 1. Cosecant is root 2 over minus 1, so we get a minus root 2. Secant is the same, root 2 over minus 1. And cotangent will also be a positive 1, just as the tangent is positive 1.